The thundering hooves on the hard-packed dirt road announced Grace Smith's arrival in Willow Creek just as surely as a telegram. It was the summer of 1875, and as dust swirled around her chestnut mare, she pulled back on the reins with trembling hands. The small Montana town stretched before her, a single dirt road lined with wooden buildings, a place where she hoped to disappear, to bury the shame that had driven her from St. Louis like a thief in the night. Grace dismounted, her long skirt catching briefly on the saddle horn before she tugged it free. She was 23, with honey-colored hair tucked beneath a plain bonnet and eyes the color of prairie sage. Those eyes darted nervously as she led her horse toward the town's only hotel, a two-story structure with a weathered sign that read Willow Creek Inn. Inside, she approached the front desk with practiced composure, despite the dust of travel clinging to her modest dress. "A room, please." "I'm not certain how long I'll be staying." The innkeeper, a round-faced woman with graying hair, looked up from her ledger. "That'll be 50 cents a night, miss. We serve breakfast at 6 and supper at 5. Thank you." Grace signed the register with a steady hand, using only her first name and last initial. She'd become accustomed to concealing her identity over the past 3 months of traveling westward. "What brings a young lady like yourself to Willow Creek?" the innkeeper asked, handing over a brass key. Grace had prepared for this question. "I'm to be the new schoolteacher." This wasn't entirely a lie she had taught children back in St. Louis before everything fell apart. She had written ahead to inquire about the position, and the response had been promising. After settling into her modest room, Grace stood at the window, gazing out at the main street. Willow Creek was smaller than she'd imagined, which meant rumors would travel fast. She would need to be careful, vigilant about the story she told about herself. No one could know about the scandal, about the man who had promised her marriage only to reveal his true married status after she had already compromised herself. No one could know about the child she had been forced to give up, or the shame that had driven her from her home. The following morning, Grace met with the town council about the teaching position. 3 stern-faced men and 1 kindly older woman questioned her about her experience and qualifications. They were desperate for someone educated to teach their children, and Grace's refined accent and obvious education worked in her favor. "The position is yours, Miss Smith," said Mr. Pearson, the council head. "School begins in 3 weeks. The teacherage behind the schoolhouse needs some attention, but it will be ready for you to move in before then." Grace felt a flutter of hope. Perhaps here in this remote town she could rebuild her life. As she left the meeting, she nearly collided with a tall man entering the building. His broad shoulders filled the doorway, and the sudden proximity made Grace step back reflexively. "Pardon me, madam," he said, tipping his worn Stetson. His voice was deep, with the slight drawl common to the region. "My fault entirely," Grace murmured, keeping her eyes lowered as she tried to slip past. "You must be the new schoolteacher," he said, causing her to look up in surprise. His eyes were a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, and a day's worth of stubble shadowed his jawline. "Word travels quickly in Willow Creek," he explained with a small smile. "I'm Cole Blackett. I run the cattle operation north of town." "Grace Smith," she replied, offering her hand briefly before withdrawing it. "Yes, I'll be teaching this fall." His gaze was direct, assessing, and Grace felt uncomfortably exposed, as if he could somehow see through the carefully constructed facade she had created. She excused herself quickly, hurrying back toward the hotel. Over the next 2 weeks, Grace worked alongside several townswomen to prepare the schoolhouse and the small attached living quarters. She was grateful for the work, which kept her hands busy and provided limited social interaction. The women were curious about her past, but Grace deflected their questions with vague references to family troubles back east. She encountered Cole Blackett several more times at the general store, where he seemed to be negotiating cattle prices with the owner, at the small church on Sunday, where his deep voice carried during hymns, and once, unexpectedly, at the teacherage itself, where he arrived with 2 of his ranch hands to repair the leaking roof. "Mr. Pearson mentioned you needed some help," he explained, removing his hat as he spoke to her. Thought I'd bring the boys over to fix that roof before the next rain. Grace stood awkwardly in the doorway of what would soon be her home. That's very kind, but unnecessary. I'm sure the town council, they've got their hands full with harvest coming, Cole interrupted. Besides, wouldn't want our new teacher getting soaked in her bed now, would we? There was nothing improper in his words, yet Grace felt heat rise to her cheeks. Thank you then, she managed, stepping aside to let the men pass. As they worked, Grace busied herself arranging her few belongings in the small bedroom. The sound of hammering overhead was oddly comforting, a reminder that she wasn't completely alone in this unfamiliar place. When the men finished, Cole knocked on her door frame. All done, Miss Smith. That roof should hold tight now. I appreciate your help, Mr. Blackett. She reached for her small purse. Please let me compensate you for your time. A look of surprise crossed his face, followed by something that might have been disappointment. That's not necessary. We're neighbors now, and neighbors help each other out here. Grace lowered her hand, embarrassed. Of course, I'm still adjusting to the ways of Willow Creek. You'll get the hang of it. His smile was warm, genuine. If you need anything else, my ranch is just 3 miles north. After he left, Grace sat heavily on her narrow bed. Cole Blackett's kindness unsettled her, back in St. Louis, she had learned the hard way that men's attentions often came with expectations, with prices to be paid. She couldn't afford to be naive again, not when the cost had been so devastating. The first day of school arrived with a clear September sky. 28 children of varying ages filed into the one-room schoolhouse, regarding their new teacher with curious eyes. Grace had donned her most severe black dress, her hair pulled back into a tight bun, hoping to project authority. Good morning, children, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. I am Miss Smith, and I will be your teacher this year. We have much to learn together. Teaching came naturally to Grace. She found comfort in the structure of lessons in the eager minds before her. For those hours in the classroom, she could almost forget the weight of her secrets. Almost, but not quite. Each night, alone in the teacherage, memories would surface: the baby girl she had held just once before the nuns took her away, the whispers that had followed her through St. Louis society, the father who had turned his back on his fallen daughter. 2 weeks into the school term, a knock at her door startled Grace from grading arithmetic papers. She opened it cautiously to find Cole Blackett standing there, hat in hand, a basket hooked over one arm. Evening, Miss Smith. My housekeeper sent some preserves and fresh bread. Thought you might appreciate something homemade, being new to town and all. Grace hesitated. Accepting gifts created obligations. That's very thoughtful, but it's just food, Miss Smith. His expression was patient. Martha would be offended if you didn't take it. Reluctantly, Grace accepted the basket. Please thank your housekeeper for me. Actually, there was something else. Cole shifted his weight slightly. The harvest dance is this Saturday at the town hall. As a prominent citizen, you should attend. Grace felt panic rise in her throat. I don't dance, Mr. Blackett. Everyone dances at the harvest celebration. It's tradition. He studied her face. But no one will force you. Just consider coming for the community's sake. The children would be pleased to see their teacher there. After he left, Grace paced her small home. A dance meant close contact, conversations, questions about her past. It meant watching others' easy affection and being reminded of what she had lost, what she had thrown away in her foolishness. Yet as the week progressed, several mothers mentioned the dance when dropping off their children, and even Mr. Pearson made a point of saying he expected to see her there. Declining would draw more attention than attending. Saturday evening found Grace standing at the edge of the town hall, watching as couples twirled to the lively music of fiddles and an accordion. She had worn her best dress, a deep green that she'd once considered cheerful but now felt conspicuous in. You came. Cole's voice behind her made her jump. It seemed expected, she replied, not turning fully. You look nice. Green suits you. Grace tensed. Compliments from men made her wary now. Thank you, she said stiffly. Cole moved to stand beside her, observing the dancers. I know what it's like to be an outsider in a place like this, he said after a moment. I came here 10 years ago with nothing but determination and a few head of cattle. People weren't exactly welcoming at first. Grace glanced at him, surprised by this confidence. And now you're the most respected rancher in the area, he chuckled. I worked hard and proved myself. That's all folks here really care about in the end, that you're honest and you contribute. The music changed to a slower tune and Cole turned to her. Would you do me the honor, Miss Smith? Just one dance. Every instinct told her to refuse, but the warmth in his eyes made her hesitate. I'm not very practiced, she warned. Neither am I. We'll stumble through it together. His hand was calloused but gentle as he led her to the dance floor. Grace kept a proper distance between them as they moved, yet even that felt dangerously intimate. Cole was respectful, making light conversation about the town and its inhabitants rather than pressing her with personal questions. As the dance ended, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A man with a weathered face and trail-worn clothes stood swaying in the doorway, clearly intoxicated. Well, if it ain't a proper town gathering, he slurred. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Grace. And who's this pretty little thing? Cole's posture changed instantly, shifting slightly in front of Grace. Evening, Jake. You're looking a bit unsteady. Maybe head back to the saloon. The man Jake squinted past Cole. Say, don't I know you from somewhere, miss? Your face is mighty familiar. Grace felt her blood turn to ice. She had never seen this man before, but if he'd been in St. Louis or any of the towns she'd passed through. You're mistaken, she said, her voice barely audible. Excuse me, I should be going. She turned and moved quickly toward the exit, ignoring the curious glances following her. Outside, she gulped the cool night air, trembling hands clutching her shawl around her shoulders. The door opened behind her, and she knew without looking that Cole had followed. Are you all right? He asked, keeping a respectful distance. Yes, just tired. She couldn't meet his eyes. I should return home. It's been a long day. I'll walk you, he offered, his tone brooking no argument. Jake Bennett has a reputation for bothering ladies when he's in his cups. They walked in silence through the quiet town, the sounds of the dance fading behind them. When they reached the teacherage, Grace paused with her hand on the door. Thank you for escorting me home, she said formally. Grace. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it caught her attention. If something's troubling you, I'm a good listener. For a brief, wild moment, she considered telling him everything about the charming lawyer who had courted her in secret, about the child conceived in promises that turned to lies, about the scandal that had destroyed her family's standing. But the moment passed, and fear reasserted itself. Good night, Mr. Blackett, she said instead, slipping inside and closing the door firmly. The incident at the dance seemed to fade from town memory, but Grace remained vigilant. Jake Bennett hadn't reappeared, and she began to hope he had moved on, taking any potential recognition of her past with him. As October painted the surrounding hills with golden hues, Grace settled into a routine. Teaching filled her days, and in the evenings, she sometimes accepted invitations to supper with the families of her pupils. She was careful to maintain her reserved demeanor, to deflect personal questions with practiced ease. Cole Blackett remained a consistent, if somewhat distant, presence. He would tip his hat when they passed on the street, occasionally stopping to ask about the school or to pass along news of town affairs. Grace found herself watching for him, though she tried to deny this even to herself. One crisp Saturday, Grace was returning from the general store when she heard her name called. Cole was approaching, leading his horse. Afternoon, Miss Smith. Those packages look heavy. I can manage, she assured him, though her arms were indeed beginning to ache from the weight of supplies for school projects. He took the parcels from her without asking. I'm heading your way. My sister Hannah is visiting with her children, and I promised to introduce them to you. They'll be attending school while they're here. Grace had heard mention of Cole's sister who lived in Denver with her husband. I'd be happy to meet them, she said, though the prospect of more social interaction made her nervous. They walked together toward the school, Cole matching his long stride to her shorter one. Hannah's been widowed 6 months now, he explained quietly. Her husband was killed in a mining accident. She's bringing the children here for a fresh start. I'm sorry to hear of her loss, Grace said sincerely. How many children? 2. Samuel is 10 and Emma's just turned 7. When they reached the teacherage, a woman was waiting on the small porch. Hannah Blackett had the same striking blue eyes as her brother, though grief had etched fine lines around them. The children stood close to their mother, regarding Grace with solemn curiosity. After introductions, Cole suggested, "Why don't you show Hannah and the children the schoolhouse while I put these packages inside for you?" Grace led them to the adjoining building, unlocking the door to reveal the orderly classroom with its rows of desks and chalk-dusted blackboard. As she spoke with Hannah about the curriculum, she noticed Samuel wandering to the small bookshelf. "You can borrow a book if you'd like," she offered, "as long as you return it by Monday." The boy selected a volume on American explorers, his expression brightening. "Thank you, madam." "Miss Smith is very kind," Cole said from the doorway, having joined them silently. His gaze was warm as it rested on Grace, making her cheeks flush. After they departed, Grace found herself thinking about Hannah's situation. The woman had suffered a devastating loss, yet she was forging ahead for her children's sake. There was a resilience there that Grace admired and perhaps could learn from. Samuel and Emma joined the school the following Monday, integrating quickly with the other children. Hannah stayed in town, taking a room at the inn while she decided whether to remain in Willow Creek permanently. A week later, Grace was surprised by another visit from Cole, this time on horseback just as school was dismissing. "Miss Smith," he called, dismounting smoothly. "I was hoping to speak with you." The last of the children scattered toward home, casting curious glances back at their teacher and the tall rancher. "Is everything all right with Samuel and Emma?" she asked, concerned. "They are doing well, thanks to you." He removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. "Actually, I came to ask a favor. Hannah's looking at a property on the edge of town, and I thought you might accompany us tomorrow. A woman's perspective would be valuable." Grace hesitated. "I'm not sure what assistance I could offer." "Hannah specifically asked for you," he said, which Grace suspected might not be entirely true. "She values your opinion, and the children have taken a shine to you." Unable to think of a reasonable refusal, Grace agreed to meet them the following afternoon after school. The property turned out to be a small but sturdy house with an attached workshop. "My brother-in-law was a carpenter," Hannah explained as they toured the space. "I thought perhaps I could sell some of his pieces, maybe even learn the trade myself." "It's a practical idea," Grace said, impressed by the woman's foresight. "There's certainly need for fine woodwork in a growing town." While Hannah examined the workshop more closely, Cole drew Grace aside. "Thank you for coming. Hannah respects your judgment, and she doesn't have many women friends yet." "She's remarkably strong," Grace observed. "Runs in the family," Cole replied with a small smile. "Our parents died when we were young. We learned to face difficulty head-on." "I'm sorry for your loss," Grace said, realizing how little she knew about this man who had shown her nothing but kindness since her arrival. It was long ago. His eyes held hers. "Loss shapes us, but it doesn't have to define us. Hannah taught me that." Something in his words touched a raw place in Grace's heart. She looked away, afraid her expression might reveal too much. That evening, alone in the teacherage, Grace found herself thinking about Cole's philosophy. Had she allowed her past to define her completely? Was she so focused on hiding her shame that she had stopped living altogether? November brought bitter winds and the first dusting of snow. Grace added extra logs to the schoolroom stove each morning, grateful for the wood that mysteriously appeared on her porch every weekend. Cole's doing, though he never mentioned it. Hannah had purchased the workshop property and was settling in with her children. She occasionally invited Grace for tea, and despite her initial reservations, Grace found herself enjoying the other woman's straightforward companionship. One such afternoon, as they watched the children playing in the yard through the window, Hannah said casually, "My brother asks about you often." Grace nearly spilled her tea. "Does he?" Hannah's perceptive gaze was uncomfortably similar to her brother's. "Cole doesn't take interest in many people, but he's taken quite an interest in you." "I'm sure he's just being neighborly," Grace deflected. "Perhaps, though he's never repaired Mrs. Peterson's roof, and she's been a neighbor for 8 years. Hannah smiled. "He's a good man, Grace, the best I know." "I'm not." Grace struggled to find the right words. "I'm not in a position to encourage attention from anyone." Hannah set down her cup. "We all have pasts, Grace. Some heavier than others." But out here, people tend to judge you on who you are now, not who you were before. Grace wanted desperately to believe her, but fear held tight. Some things can't be overlooked, maybe not, but they can be understood. Hannah reached across the table to touch Grace's hand briefly. Just something to consider. The town began preparations for Thanksgiving, planning a community dinner at the church. Grace threw herself into helping her students create decorations, grateful for the distraction from her increasingly confused feelings about Cole Blackett. 3 days before Thanksgiving, a violent storm descended upon Willow Creek. Grace had just dismissed her students early when the wind picked up dramatically, driving snow and ice against the schoolhouse windows. She was securing the shutters when the door burst open, admitting Cole along with a blast of frigid air. "You need to come with me," he said without preamble, snow melting on his shoulders. "The creek's rising fast. This building is too close to the banks." "But my things," Grace protested. "No time," he held out his hand. "Trust me, Grace," something in his voice convinced her. She grabbed her coat and placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her into the howling storm. His horse waited outside, stamping nervously. "We'll go to my ranch," he shouted over the wind as he helped her mount. "It's on higher ground." He swung up behind her, one arm securing her against him as he turned the horse northward. The ride was a blur of stinging snow and numbing cold. Grace huddled against Cole's chest, grateful for his solid warmth at her back. By the time they reached the ranch house, she could barely feel her fingers and toes. Martha, the housekeeper, exclaimed in dismay when they entered. "Get her by the fire, Mr. Blackett. I'll fetch blankets and hot tea." Cole guided Grace to a chair before the roaring hearth in a comfortable sitting room. "You're safe now," he said, his voice gentle as he helped remove her ice-encrusted coat. "This place has weathered worse storms." Wrapped in blankets, a steaming cup between her hands, Grace gradually stopped shivering. Cole sat nearby, watching her with concern. "The school," she began, "will likely be fine. I was being cautious." He leaned forward. "I couldn't risk you being stranded there alone if the creek flooded." His obvious care for her welfare touched Grace deeply. "Thank you," she whispered. Martha entered with a tray of food and the news that the storm showed no signs of abating. "You'll be staying the night, Miss Smith. I've prepared the guest room." Alarm flashed through Grace. "I couldn't possibly. You could possibly freeze to death trying to return to town," Cole interrupted firmly. "No one will think anything improper. Martha's here as chaperone, and Hannah and the children arrived this morning for the holiday." As if summoned by her name, Hannah appeared in the doorway. "Grace, thank goodness Cole found you. We were so worried when the storm worsened." With Hannah's presence easing her concerns about propriety, Grace reluctantly accepted that she would be spending the night at the Blackett Ranch. After a simple but hearty supper, Hannah showed her to a comfortable bedroom. "Sleep well," Hannah said, pausing at the door. "And Grace, I'm glad you're here safely." The howling wind kept Grace awake long into the night. When she finally dozed off, her dreams were troubled images of St. Louis society ladies pointing and whispering, of her father's face contorted with disgrace, of a tiny bundle being carried away by stern-faced nuns. She woke with a gasp, tears on her cheeks. Disoriented in the unfamiliar room, it took a moment to remember where she was. The storm still raged outside, but the house stood firm against its fury. Unable to return to sleep, Grace wrapped herself in a quilt and made her way downstairs, thinking to sit by the fire. She was surprised to find Cole already there, stoking the embers back to life. He turned at her approach. "Couldn't sleep, the storm," she explained, not mentioning the dreams. He nodded, understanding. "It gets into your bones, that wind. Sit, I'll build up the fire." Grace settled into a chair, watching as he skillfully arranged logs and coaxed flames higher. There was something comforting about his quiet competence, about the way he moved with purpose and care. "You've made quite an impression on Willow Creek," he said, taking the chair opposite her. "The children adore you, their parents sing your praises." "I enjoy teaching them," she said simply. "You belong here, Grace." His voice was soft but certain. "I knew it the first time I saw you." She looked up, startled by his directness. "You don't know me." "I know enough." He held her gaze. "I know you're kind and intelligent. I know you work hard and care deeply." I know you carry something heavy, something that makes you keep everyone at arm's length. Grace felt exposed, vulnerable. You can't possibly understand. Then help me understand. He leaned forward, eyes intent. Whatever it is, Grace, it doesn't change who you are now. The words hung between them, an invitation and a challenge. Grace looked into the fire, heart pounding. Could she trust him with her truth? After months of running, of hiding, could she finally stand still and face her past? I made a terrible mistake, she began, her voice barely audible above the storm. In St. Louis, I fell in love with a man. He was charming, respected. He promised marriage. Cole's expression remained steady, encouraging her to continue. I believed him. I gave him everything. The shame burned hot in her cheeks. Then I discovered he was already married, had been for years. He deceived you, Cole said quietly. Grace nodded, unable to look at him. There was a child, a little girl. I couldn't keep her an unmarried mother disgraced. My father arranged for her to be adopted by a family in Chicago. I never even learned their name. Tears fell freely now. My reputation was ruined. People I'd known all my life turned away from me. My father said I was dead to him. So I left, traveling west, starting over where no one knew my shame. She finally raised her eyes to his, expecting disgust or at least disappointment. Instead, she found only compassion. You've been carrying this alone all this time, he said. How could I share it? Who would want to be associated with a fallen woman? The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Cole moved from his chair to kneel before her. You were betrayed by someone you trusted. That doesn't make you fallen, Grace. It makes you human. In the eyes of society, we're not insane. Louis society, he interrupted gently. We're in Willow Creek, where people judge you on who you are now, not what happened before you arrived. She shook her head. If people knew, if the right people knew people who care about you, they would stand by you. He took her hand carefully, as if she might shatter. I would stand by you, Grace. The sincerity in his eyes made her breath catch. Why would you do that? Because I've come to care for you, deeply. His thumb traced small circles on her palm. Because I see your strength, your goodness, your courage in starting over. You make it sound noble, she whispered. It wasn't, I was running away. And yet here you are, building a new life, teaching children, becoming part of this community. His smile was tender. That's not running away. That's moving forward. Grace felt something shift inside her, a loosening of the tight knot of shame she'd carried for so long. I miss her, she admitted, the words she'd never spoken aloud. My daughter. Every day I wonder where she is, if she's loved. Of course you do. Cole's voice was rough with emotion. That's what makes you a mother, Grace, no matter where she is. The simple validation undid her. Grace covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Cole moved to sit beside her, drawing her gently into his arms. You don't have to carry this alone anymore, he murmured against her hair. If you'll let me, I'd like to help you bear it. Grace clung to him, releasing months of bottled grief and fear. When she finally quieted, she remained in the circle of his arms, too exhausted to move or to consider propriety. What if you regret this? She asked, her voice muffled against his shoulder. What if you wake tomorrow and realize the gravity of what I've done? Cole pulled back slightly to look at her. What if I don't? What if I wake tomorrow still believing you're the strongest, most honorable woman I've ever met? How can you be so certain? Because I know my own heart, Grace. His fingers brushed a strand of hair from her tear-stained cheek. And it's telling me that what happened in your past doesn't diminish who you are, it only makes your resilience more remarkable. The storm had quieted outside, and dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. Grace realized they had talked through the night. I should return to my room, she said reluctantly. Before the household wakes, Cole nodded, helping her to her feet. Will you consider what I've said about not facing this alone anymore? Yes, she promised. I will. In the days that followed, Grace felt strangely lighter. Sharing her secret with Cole had released something within her, not eliminating her regrets, but making them somehow more bearable. The storm had indeed caused the creek to flood, damaging several buildings, including the schoolhouse. Classes were suspended until repairs could be made, and Grace found herself with unexpected free time. Cole invited her to ride out to the ranch again, this time to see the new foals born earlier that year. Hannah and the children accompanied them, making the outing entirely proper, yet Grace was aware of Cole's attention, of his gentle solicitude. As they walked through the stables, Cole explained his breeding program and his hopes for expanding the ranch. Grace listened, struck by his passion for the land and his vision for the future. "You've built something remarkable here," she told him. "You should be proud." "I am," he admitted, "but it's only half of what I want." He glanced at her, then away. "A ranch needs a family to make it a home." Grace felt her heart quicken at his implication. "Cole, you don't need to say anything now," he assured her. "I just want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." 2 weeks before Christmas, the repaired schoolhouse reopened. The children returned eagerly, and Grace threw herself into preparations for the holiday program, grateful for the routine. Cole continued his quiet courtship, bringing books he thought she might enjoy, escorting her to church on Sundays, occasionally joining her for supper at Hannah's home. He never pressed her for a commitment, seeming content to let her set the pace of their relationship. One evening, just days before Christmas, Cole arrived at the teacherage with an unexpected proposition. "I've been corresponding with a private investigator in Chicago," he said once they were seated by the fire. "If you're willing, he might be able to locate information about your daughter's adoption." Grace stared at him, hope and fear warring in her chest. "Is that possible?" "He believes so. With the information you have, the date, the convent where she was born." Cole took her hand. "You wouldn't have to make contact if you didn't wish to, but you could at least know that she's well." Tears filled Grace's eyes. "You would do this for me." "I would do anything for you, Grace." His voice was earnest. "Your past doesn't frighten me away, it only makes me admire your strength more." In that moment, looking into his steadfast blue eyes, Grace realized she had fallen in love with him, with his quiet strength, his unwavering support, his belief in her despite knowing her darkest secret. "I love you," she said simply, the words feeling like coming home. Cole's face lit with joy. He drew her to him, kissing her with gentle reverence. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've loved you since I first saw you standing in the council building, looking so determined and so afraid." "I'm not afraid anymore," Grace realized. "Not when I'm with you." On Christmas Eve, the entire town gathered in the church for the children's program. Grace watched proudly as her students recited poems and sang carols, their faces glowing in the candlelight. Afterward, as the townspeople exchanged greetings and gifts, Cole took her hand and led her outside. Snow was falling gently, transforming Willow Creek into a glittering wonderland. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. He withdrew not a package, but a letter. Grace took it with trembling hands. "What is this? News from Chicago?" His eyes were soft with emotion. "Your daughter is living with a doctor and his wife. They named her Hope. She's healthy and cherished." Tears blurred Grace's vision as she clutched the letter. "She's all right. More than all right, according to my investigator. She's loved, Grace." Cole's voice was tender. "Just as you are." As snowflakes settled on her lashes, Cole knelt before her in the soft white powder. "Grace Smith, I love you with all that I am. Your past, your present, and if you'll have me, your future. Will you marry me?" In his eyes, she saw not judgment but acceptance, not pity but admiration. He knew her completely, her failings, her regrets, her hopes, and loved her still. "Yes," she whispered, feeling truly free for the first time in years. "Yes, I will marry you." Cole slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, then stood to gather her in his arms. As they kissed beneath the gently falling snow, Grace knew that her past had not ruined her after all. It had led her here, to this man, to this moment, to a love strong enough to overcome shame and build a future bright with promise. They were married on New Year's Day of 1876 in the Willow Creek church, Hannah standing as Grace's witness. The townspeople celebrated with them, embracing the schoolteacher who had become one of their own. In the spring, Cole and Grace traveled to Chicago. They didn't interfere with Hope's new family, but from a distance, they saw a laughing 3-year-old girl with honey-colored hair playing in a park with loving parents. "She's happy," Grace whispered, both heartbroken and relieved. "That's all that matters." "We'll keep watch over her from afar," Cole promised. "And maybe someday when she's older, if she wishes to know about you. Then we'll be here," Grace finished. "Thank you for giving me this gift." When they returned to Willow Creek, Grace continued teaching, now living at the ranch as Mrs. Cole Blackett. The following winter, she gave birth to a son they named Daniel, and 2 years later, a daughter they called Faith. On warm summer evenings, they would sit on the porch of their ranch house, watching their children play while the sun set over the Montana hills. Cole would take her hand, his touch still sending warmth through her after all their years together. "Are you happy?" he would ask sometimes, his eyes searching hers. And Grace would smile, thinking of the frightened young woman who had arrived in Willow Creek believing her life was defined by one terrible mistake. How wrong she had been. "Completely," she would answer, and know it to be the truest thing she had ever said.